Is the Don Carlos Personal Reserve worth all the hype? Today we're going to talk about it in the latest Ash report. Let's do it. I'm very excited about trying this one. It's got a Cameroon wrapper, Dominican filler and binder, and what's interesting about this one is it's aged 10 years, comes out of the same location that the Opus X and stuff comes out of in the, I think, Casa de Fuente, that farm, that famous farm. So very excited about trying this one. And as always, you know, we're going to talk about the flavor, talk about the construction, talk about the value, and talk about the strength match on it. Well, let's get into this puppy and see where it takes us. First, we're talking about flavor. And I could tell you right off the bat, just on the beginning of this first third, the flavor is definitely their spice, and it hits you right in the back of your mouth, but not overwhelming. It's very smooth, and then right away comes a nutty, a little bit of buttery taste, and it's got the dried fruit, which I actually really enjoy. I really enjoy this. Another one that had that, like I said, was the Opus X, but this one actually has a little bit stronger. That Anejo I had, that was so much spicier, right? Because it was a power punch, but this one is a lot more smoother just right off the bat, and it holds that flavor, which I like. A lot more cigars I'm trying, you know, recently, they're pushing the limits on flavors, which is cool, but they don't hold the flavor, if that makes sense. This one lingers, and I really like that about it. So far in the first third, the flavor is going very nicely. Let's go ahead and get into construction. By the way, I found this really nice looking bush out in my backyard, so these azaleas. Anyways, the construction is okay. The ash looks great on this. The draw is phenomenal. It is a straight cigar, but if you can kind of see, right, there is a decent amount of veins through this one, and some of it seems like it's coming apart. Maybe it could be that Cameroon wrapper, but I've had Cameroon wrappers and other Arturo Fuente cigars, and it just doesn't seem to come apart like this one. Maybe it's the age, but from a construction standpoint, you know, straight, great ash, good draw, but it could be better. Let's get into the strength match of this. Now, the strength of the Personal Reserve is supposed to be around medium to full. And I can tell you, I can always tell when I'm trying something that's supposed to be medium to full, because, you know, you can either kind of feel it in your chest, right, or it moves up to your head. You know what I mean? And you get that nicotine rush, you know, and where does it stay? You know, because a milder cigar, you're not going to really feel any of that. With a medium to full, you're going to feel it in your chest. And depending on where, because, you know, something's not just medium or medium full, right? It can be, or full, right? It's going to be a couple of deviations somewhere there in between sometimes too, right? So some are way closer to full, some are way closer to medium. I think so far this one, it's definitely way closer to medium than medium to full, which I enjoy, especially, you know, if it's at lunchtime or right after lunch. Sorry, it's windy out today. But yeah, so I think this one really stays around where the strength match is, which is medium, you know, maybe a little bit above medium, you know, but definitely closer to medium. Let's go ahead and get into the value, the cost of the Don Carlos Personal Reserve. So of course, the cost comes in around $32 to $35 a stick, which, you know, again, it's expensive. That's expensive. I mean, the Queen of Hearts, the rare pink, which was the most expensive of that line, is around $32 to $35 a stick. So this one definitely is in that upper range of expense. I mean, it's not going as far as Opus and those ones who can go higher, right? And, you know, even an ESG that's aged 21 years, right, that comes from the same farm, is a bit cheaper than that. But, you know what I mean? That's the cost of it. Is between $32 to $35. Now, something interesting about this, I find very fascinating, especially when you have cigar makers who making cigars for themselves, because some have such like Arturo Fuente, some of the, you know, like Drew Estate, these companies that are so massive with such huge lines of cigars. How do they come about having a cigar that they enjoy? And so it's very interesting, the story of the Personal Reserve, right? So I guess the story goes, this was something that Fuente Sr. really enjoyed, and then Junior smoked on a regular basis and kind of made this for his own self, right? This was something that he smoked, he put together, and it changes, which is kind of interesting about this one, right? Is over time, the blend changes as his palate changed. And I know they've had some releases, right? They had the Shark come out. They had that 80th anniversary release. And each time it's a little bit different. So, and you know, there are small batches of them released because of how long they're aged. So I think in that sense, this is it's got a really cool story behind it. All right, now we're gonna get into this second third of this, and I will admit I'm impressed a little bit because the first bit of flavor right from the first third, like I said, was definitely got some of that dried fruit. And it had a little bit of spice, and it carried that through. But now what I'm seeing with this is that it's opened up into even being sweeter. And now I can really taste a rich espresso. So I'm very impressed that it not only changed one, because I'm all about cigars that change from the first, second, and third, right, to different flavors, but it kind of changed two different flavors. So I think that's actually pretty cool. I don't know if I've had a cigar that's done that yet. So that's pretty neat. Now for the scoring part of this, I think that for this particular, Don Carlos Personal Reserve, there's a lot of factors out of the four categories we had, right? Like we have flavor, which, I have to say the flavor is just spot on this. And the 2-part change was totally blew my mind. Like that's something new. I've not experienced that before. I'm not saying there's other cigars out there that don't do that, but this is the first one that I've experienced it on. So that gets very high marks. The construction, though, that gets not very high marks. I mean, there is definitely a lot more well-constructed cigars than this one. It's not that it wasn't straight or anything like that. The burn was very good, so I will admit that, and the draw was good. So that does get good marks. But the cigar itself looked, like I said, there was some sort of like chipping on some of the. And this was in the cellophane. It hadn't been pulled out or anything. There was the wrapper definitely had a lot of veins going all the way through it. You know what I mean? And some of it was a little, like there was, some part of the leaf that looked like it might have been coming off a teeny bit. Again, it could be because these are aged quite a bit. So maybe that's why, but the construction is not the best, especially not from Arturo Fuente. So it's not the best construction I've seen. So that's going to bring down the score some. The strength match is pretty much right on. In fact, I think it's more towards medium now as I'm getting more into this because I'm not feeling it really. I'm not even feeling it that much in my chest yet. Now, again, I still have about a little over a third to go. So, that can hit a little more. But I think that it's definitely medium cigar. So the strength match is pretty close. When it comes to the pricing, those marks, again, get a challenge to me because it's $32 to $35 a stick, which is pretty darn high. So I do think that the overall score for the Don Carlos Personal Reserve from Arturo Fuente, I'm going to give it a 90. And I don't typically do the scores above 90, or like even above 89 or 90. But, I'm impressed by, again, some of the changes. And I'm be honest, I could have probably gone higher if it wasn't for those other things. But the construction of it, the cost of it, I think that keeps it there. But I'm blown away by the flavor of this cigar. So that's kind of what's really keeping it pushed up along with the strength. All right, there you go. So Arturo Fuente, Don Carlos Personal Reserve, 90. And as always, the search continues.